I came home on a Thursday night when the sky had already gone dark and the February air bit through my coat like it had a grudge. My flight from Denver landed 40 minutes late. My carry-on had a broken wheel that scraped against every tile in the terminal, and all I wanted was to walk through my front door, kiss my son on the forehead, and fall asleep next to someone who loved me. I had been gone for 9 days. 9 days of client meetings, hotel breakfasts that tasted like cardboard, and FaceTime calls where my son Noah would hold up his drawings for me to see through a 4-inch screen. He had just turned 7 in January. He still slept with a stuffed elephant named Peanut that he'd had since he was 2. He was the reason I worked as hard as I did, the reason I'd built a career in corporate accounting that took me away from home more than I liked. My husband had been home the entire time. I remember pulling into our driveway and noticing an unfamiliar minivan parked where I usually parked. I didn't think much of it. I grabbed my bag, unlocked the front door, and stepped inside. The living room was loud. The television was on full volume. 2 kids I barely recognized were running in circles around the coffee table, and the kitchen smelled like someone had cooked a full dinner. Garlic bread? Something with tomato sauce, the kind of meal my husband never made when it was just the 2 of us. I stood in the doorway with my coat still on and my broken suitcase behind me, and I scanned the room. My husband was sitting at the dining table laughing. His brother was sitting across from him. His brother's wife, Diane, was pouring herself a glass of wine at my kitchen counter like she owned the place, and their 2 kids, maybe 9 and 11, were running through my living room like it was a hotel hallway. I said hello. My husband looked up, smiled, said, "Hey, you're home early," and went back to his conversation. I was not home early. I was home exactly when I said I would be. I put my bag down and asked where Noah was. My husband said he was probably in his room. I went down the hall. Noah's door was closed. I knocked and opened it, and my heart did something it has never quite recovered from. My son was sitting in the corner of his room on the floor, not at his desk, not on his bed, but on the floor, with Peanut in his lap and his dinner. A peanut butter sandwich, no plate, just on a paper towel, sitting next to him. His light was off. He was using the glow from his small nightlight to look at a picture book. He looked up when I opened the door and said, "Mommy, you're home." He said it the way children say things when they have been waiting a long time, but have given up expecting it to actually happen. I sat down on the floor next to him, and I held him, and I asked him how long he'd been in his room. He said since after school. I asked him why he was eating in here instead of at the table. He looked at the door and then back at me and said, "Dad said the cousins needed the space." He was 7 years old, and he had been eating a peanut butter sandwich on the floor of his own room in the dark, because his father had decided that his brother's children needed more space at the table. I went back to the dining room. I told my husband I needed to talk to him in the kitchen. He came, still smiling, clearly not reading the situation. I asked him how long his brother's family had been staying with us. He said 4 days. I asked why he hadn't told me. He said he had texted me. I checked my phone. He had sent a single message that said, "Ryan and Diane are crashing here for a bit. Hope that's okay." I had been in back-to-back client presentations for 3 days and had sent back a thumbs-up emoji without reading it properly. That was not consent to turn our home into a full-time guest house and exile our son to his bedroom floor. I told him that Noah had been eating alone in his room. He shrugged and said Noah was fine, that kids adjust, that Ryan's kids needed somewhere to sleep, and Noah's room had a trundle bed. I stared at him for a moment. I asked if Ryan's kids were sleeping in Noah's room. He said just one of them, the younger one. The older one was on the pull-out couch. So my son had been displaced from his own bed in his own room, had been eating alone on the floor for 4 days while his father sat at the dining table laughing over garlic bread with people who had contributed nothing to this household. I told my husband that Ryan's family needed to find somewhere else to stay. He told me I was being dramatic. He said they had nowhere to go, that Ryan had lost his job, that family helps family. I said I understood that and I was willing to help, but not like this. Not at the expense of our son. He told me I'd been away for 9 days and maybe I didn't understand the whole situation. I told him I understood exactly what I was seeing, That night I moved the trundle bed back to Noah's room, put fresh sheets on it, and told my son he was sleeping in his own bed. He asked if the cousins would be mad. I told him it didn't matter. I didn't sleep well. I lay there listening to my husband breathing slowly beside me, already asleep, and I kept thinking about that paper towel, about that peanut butter sandwich, about my son sitting in the dark with Peanut, waiting. The next morning, I called my bank to transfer some funds between accounts. We had a joint checking account that we used for household expenses, and I had my own savings account that I kept separate for emergencies and long-term goals. I had been depositing a portion of my paycheck into the joint account every month for 3 years, always more than my husband contributed because he worked part-time remotely and his income was inconsistent. The woman on the phone asked me to verify my balance before she processed the transfer. She told me the joint account had $847. I had deposited $6,200 into that account 11 days ago. Before that, I had deposited $6,200 every month for 3 years. I sat very still and asked her to repeat the balance. $847. I asked her to pull up the transaction history for the past 6 months. She walked me through it slowly. There were withdrawals. Consistent, deliberate withdrawals. Sometimes $2,000 at ATMs in areas I didn't recognize. Sometimes online transfers to an account I didn't recognize, restaurant charges, hotel stays, purchases at stores I had never shopped at, every month. For 6 months, I added it up in my head while she was still talking. Then I did it again because the number felt wrong. It was close to $40,000. Gone in 6 months in amounts small enough that no single withdrawal triggered a fraud alert, large enough that over time they had quietly emptied everything we had built together. I thanked the woman and hung up. I sat at my kitchen table for 20 minutes without moving. Then I picked up my phone and called my accountant friend, a woman I had known since college named Patricia, who had helped me set up my personal financial structure years ago. I told her what I had found. She told me not to move any money yet, not to confront my husband yet, and to get a family attorney before I did anything else. She gave me a name. She said, "Do this today." I did it that day. The attorney, a woman named Linda, met with me the following morning. I brought 6 months of bank statements printed at the library on my way over because I didn't want to print them at home. Linda looked at everything carefully, asked me several questions, and then told me clearly what I was looking at. Unauthorized use of marital funds, potentially fraudulent transfers to an external account. She told me not to discuss this with my husband, not to let him know I had seen the records, and to gather whatever documentation I could without tipping him off. She also told me that the account receiving the transfers was opened in my husband's name alone, which meant he had deliberately routed money away from our joint account into a private one. She said if I wanted to pursue this, there were legal avenues and potentially criminal ones depending on the amounts and intent. I asked her what I should do about the living situation. She told me that Ryan and his family being in the home complicated things but was not immediately a legal issue. She said my priority was securing my finances and protecting Noah. I went home that afternoon and said nothing. I helped Noah with his homework at the kitchen table, while Diane watched something loud on our television and the kids ran through the hallway. My husband came home from wherever he had been, kissed me on the cheek like everything was normal, and asked what was for dinner. I said I hadn't cooked anything. He looked mildly surprised and ordered pizza for everyone without asking me. I watched him interact with his brother's family that night. The way he was easy and relaxed with them, laughing at things that weren't that funny, filling their glasses, talking about old memories. And then I watched the way he interacted with Noah, distracted, brief, the kind of attention that a man gives when he is performing fatherhood for an audience rather than actually doing it. I started keeping notes on my phone. Dates, times, observations. Not dramatic. Just facts. That week I also discovered something I hadn't expected to find. I had borrowed my husband's laptop to print a work document because mine was charging in the bedroom. He had left his email open. I wasn't looking for anything. I was reaching for the print button and his inbox was right there on the screen. The subject line of the most recent email read, Sunday, same place? The sender was a name I didn't recognize. A woman's name. I stood there for a moment. Then I took a photo of the screen with my phone and closed the browser and printed my document and walked away. I called Patricia again that evening. She told me to forward what I had to Linda. I did. Linda called me the next day. She had done some preliminary checking. The email address corresponded to a woman who lived about 20 minutes from our home. The hotel charges in the transaction history matched dates when I had been traveling for work. She said this was consistent with what she had seen in other cases. She said she was sorry. I sat in my car in the parking garage at work and I let myself cry for exactly 7 minutes. I timed it. Then I wiped my face, reapplied what I needed to, and went back to my desk. I want to be clear about something. I did not confront my husband that week. Not because I wasn't angry. I was so angry that some mornings I had to take 3 deep breaths before I could look at him over the coffee maker. But Linda had told me that timing mattered. That what I did in the next few weeks would determine what I walked away with. And I had Noah to think about. I had to be the one who stayed steady. I filed for divorce on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after I came home and found my son eating on the floor. My husband found out when Linda's office sent the paperwork to the house. He called me 4 times while I was in a client meeting. When I got out and saw the missed calls, I felt something settle in my chest, like a door closing quietly. He was waiting in the kitchen when I got home. He was pale. He asked me what this was. I told him he had the documents. He could read what it was. He asked me to talk to him. I said my attorney had advised me not to discuss the case with him directly. He should contact his own attorney. He switched tactics. He said he loved me. He said whatever was happening, we could work through it. He said Noah needed his family together. I looked at him for a moment. Then I asked him if he remembered the night I came home from Denver. He said yes. I asked him if he had noticed that our son was eating alone on the floor of his room. He said it wasn't like that. I said I wasn't asking for his interpretation. I was asking if he had noticed. He was quiet. I told him that was the answer. Ryan and Diane left 3 days after the divorce papers were served. I never found out if my husband asked them to leave or if they simply understood that the situation had changed. I didn't ask. I changed the locks the following Saturday and had Noah help me pick out a new doormat because he had always wanted one that looked like a frog. The legal process took longer than a story wants it to. 7 months of documentation, mediation sessions that went nowhere, depositions that were tiring and strange. My husband hired an attorney who tried several strategies, including arguing that the withdrawals were for joint household expenses and that I had authorized them implicitly through the thumbs-up text. Linda dismantled that argument piece by piece. The hotel charges, the transfers to a private account, the timeline of my travel dates matching the charges, his employment records, which revealed that he had not been working his remote job for 4 months, he had been terminated and had not told me, which was why the household income had shifted so dramatically onto my shoulders alone without my knowledge. Noah's custody arrangement became the part I fought hardest for. My husband wanted 50-50. Linda and I documented everything, the school pickup record showing I had done 90% of school transportation, the teacher communications, the doctor's appointment records, Noah's own words as gathered by a court-appointed child advocate who spoke with him privately. Noah told the advocate that when his mom was away for work, he mostly watched himself after school, that he made his own snacks, that sometimes his dad forgot to pick him up and the school called the emergency contact, which was my mother, twice in 4 months. The judge awarded me primary custody. My husband has Noah every other weekend and 1 weekday overnight. The financial settlement took the unauthorized withdrawals fully into account. I was awarded my full share of marital assets plus restitution for the documented unauthorized transfers. His attorney tried to negotiate it down. It didn't go down. There was also a separate matter. The woman from the emails, my husband had been seeing her for 14 months. Some of what had been taken from our joint account had been spent on her. Not all of it. Some of it had gone to his brother, which explained why Ryan had been so comfortable in my home. My husband had been quietly funding his brother's lifestyle for months, while quietly hollowing out the account that was supposed to be for our mortgage and our son's future. I moved out of that house 8 months after I filed. I hadn't wanted to uproot Noah mid-school year, so I waited until summer. I found a smaller house about 12 minutes from his school, and a neighborhood with a good park nearby, and a neighbor with a dog that Noah immediately fell in love with. We painted his new room together on a Saturday. He chose a shade of blue that was almost too bright. It is exactly right. I want to tell you about the moment that mattered most to me, because it didn't happen in a courtroom, and it didn't happen the day I signed the final divorce papers. It happened about 2 months after we moved into the new house. Noah and I were eating dinner at our kitchen table, actual food, actual plates, and the two of us talking about something he had seen in a nature documentary. He had a new thing he did where he would tell me a fact and then watch my face to see if I was impressed. That evening, the fact was about elephants and memory. He told me that elephants never forget faces they recognize as safe. I told him that was one of the best things I had ever heard. He nodded seriously and went back to his pasta. I looked at him across that table, in that kitchen that belonged to us, in a house where no one was eating on the floor, and I thought about everything I had not let break me. The 9 days of hotel breakfasts, the broken suitcase wheel, the paper towel on the floor of a dark room, the $40,000 that disappeared in 6 months, the 14 months I hadn't known about, 7 months of legal proceedings that wore me thin in ways I still don't talk about very often. None of it had broken me. Some of it had come close. I am still a corporate accountant. I still travel for work sometimes, though I've restructured my schedule to minimize overnight trips. I have a good system now. My mother covers the evenings when I have late calls, and Noah's school has my information listed correctly, under my name, with my number first. I set up a separate savings account for Noah when the settlement finalized. I put the first deposit in the day the paperwork was signed. It's not a dramatic amount, but it grows every month and only I have access to it, and that is entirely the point. My husband and I do not have much contact. We communicate about Noah through a co-parenting app that logs everything, which Linda suggested and which I will be grateful for indefinitely. He has a new apartment. He is still seeing the woman from the emails as far as I know. That stopped being something I thought about daily somewhere around month 4. What I think about now is different. I think about the fact that Noah tells me things, real things, not just the performed cheerfulness of a child who has learned to be careful. He tells me when he's worried, when something at school bothers him, when he misses something or wants something or doesn't understand something. He told me last week that he was nervous about starting 3rd grade. I told him that was smart because new things deserved a little nervousness. He seems satisfied with that answer. He sleeps in his own bed every night. The room is the right shade of blue. Peanut the elephant is on the pillow where Peanut belongs. I came home from Denver on a Thursday in February and found my son sitting in the dark, eating a peanut butter sandwich on the floor because the adults in his life had decided other things mattered more. I decided then, on that floor beside him, that nothing was ever going to matter more than making sure he knew he was first. Not an afterthought. Not the child who adjusts. First. If you are watching this and you recognize any part of what I went through, the quiet draining, the being told you're dramatic, the child who has learned to make themselves small, I want you to know that getting out is possible and doing it carefully is worth it. Talk to an attorney before you talk to your spouse. Document what you can. And do not let anyone tell you that your child's needs are something to be compromised around. They are not. Thank you for being here on this channel. If this story stayed with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you're going through something similar and you don't know where to start, drop a comment below. You are not as alone in this as it feels right now. I have thought a lot about what made the difference between surviving what happened and actually coming out of it whole. It wasn't luck. It wasn't the settlement, or the custody arrangement, or the fact that the judge ruled the way she did. Those things mattered, but they were consequences. What made the difference was a series of choices I made when I was exhausted and frightened and had every reason to act impulsively, and didn't. When I sat down on Noah's bedroom floor that first night, I made a quiet decision that I didn't even have words for yet. It was something closer to a commitment than a plan. I committed to seeing clearly, to not letting the pain I felt push me into actions that would cost Noah more than they cost the people who had hurt us. That restraint, which felt at the time like weakness, like I was swallowing something I should have spit out, turned out to be the most powerful thing I did throughout the entire process. There is a version of that night where I walk back to the dining room and say everything I was thinking, where I make a scene, wake the kids, give my husband every reason to paint me as unstable in the months ahead. I understood that version very well. I felt it pulling at me. But I also understood, somewhere below the anger, that a person who acts from pure emotion in a crisis almost always hands power to the person who caused the crisis. I refused to hand him anything. What I've come to believe, not from anything anyone told me, but from living through it, is that how a person behaves when they are being wronged reveals more about their character than how they behave when everything is going well. It is easy to be decent when life is comfortable. It is much harder to be deliberate, to be measured, to keep your focus on what actually matters. When you are standing in your own kitchen, realizing the person you built a life with has been quietly taking it apart. Noah is the reason I held it together. But he is also the lesson I keep returning to. He had been eating alone on a floor for 4 days, and the first thing he said when I opened that door was not, "I'm hungry" or "I'm scared." It was, "Mommy, you're home." He had been practicing, in his small 7-year-old way, the same thing I had to practice as an adult, holding on to what was real and reliable while the rest of the environment failed him. Children absorb what they live inside. I knew that if I fell apart, he would learn that falling apart was what people did when things got hard. I wanted him to learn something different from watching me. The things my husband chose, the deception, the financial drain, the casual displacement of his own child, were not the actions of a person who had stopped loving us overnight. They were patterns that had always been there, in smaller forms, that I had been too busy or too trusting or too committed to the idea of our family to see clearly. I do not say that to blame myself. I say it because understanding it changed the way I make decisions now. I pay attention differently. I ask harder questions. I do not confuse someone's comfort with my own security. What I have now, the blue room, the kitchen table where Noah tells me elephant facts, the savings account that only I can access, none of it fell into my life. I built it carefully in the middle of one of the hardest years I have ever had. That is the only kind of stability worth having, the kind you construct on purpose, with clear eyes, after you have seen exactly what you are capable of surviving.